The Swedish kingdom of 450,000 kilometers squared shares the Scandinavian peninsula with Norway and Finland. Malmö is the third most populous city in Sweden, with its 258,000 inhabitants. It is located in the southwestern area near Öresund. Since the millennium, there is a bridge connecting Malmö to the Danish capital Copenhagen. Malmö is the centre of the most southern county of Sweden, named Skåne. The city was built by the Archbishop of Lund as a fortified marine passage. The city, belonging to Denmark at that time, was one of the biggest cities of the country, with its 5,000 inhabitants in the 15th century. The trade of the former Åre Island had been strengthened by the Hanseatic League. In addition to industrial activity, the herring fishing also had high importance. The growth of the city enforced the construction of a new fortress named Malmö House. In 1526, Malmö migrated to the Lutheran faith, being the first Lutheran town in Scandinavia. Malmö and Skåne province got attached to Sweden according to the Treaty of Roskilde in 1658. Malmö owes much to the Jørgen Koch, coin maker of the Danish king, who was the mayor of the city for a while. The construction of the main square and several buildings in the city are attached to his name. His house can be found on the corner of the Stortorget and Västergatan. The golden age of Malmö ended by a siege and epidemic, and the decline was only stopped by the construction of a new port at the end of the 18th century. New industrialization was started by the construction of railways and became a determining factor for the next 150 years. In the last decades, declining industry and loss of working places caused serious problems in the town, which could be more or less overcome in the second part of the 1990s. The main square, Stortorget, is the old marketplace of Malmö, with pleasant outdoor seats. It also gives place for the City Hall, which was built in 1546 in Renaissance style. In the 19th century, Helge Zettervall redeveloped the City Hall. The first floor assembly hall is especially magnificent. The square gives home to the cultural fest of Malmö in summers. One performer after another takes the stage. Evenings have an adorable festive mood. In the pavilions of the square, delicacies of the Swedish cuisine can be tasted. In the centre of the square we find the equestrian statue of Carl Gustaf X. Attachment of southern provinces to Sweden is linked to his name. His monument is created by John Borgensson. Karl X Gustaf was the king of Sweden for 6 years. He died in Gothenburg at age of 38 years in February 1660. His statue and a modern fountain share the main square. The shopping street, named Sötergatan, starts from the Söterget, leading by the small marketplace called Lilla Torg, which is surrounded by 400 to 500-year-old buildings. Narrow, intimate lanes are awaiting us to discover them. It's worth watching the details of the houses masterfully made of stone, iron and bricks. In front of the City Hall there is the old residency of the province mayor. The villa was built by merging two buildings in 1728. Building works of the biggest Gothic church of the Sweden's southern region, named St. Peter, was started about 1300 in Romanesque. The monumental building can still be visited and is a good example of the so-called Baltic brick Gothic. Its design was made by using the St. Mary Cathedral in Lübeck as a sample. It was built in basilica style with a two-aisle transept, a strong-built central tower with a pyramidal tower roof, which has been rebuilt several times over the years. The sanctuary is surrounded by a cloister. Statically supporting arches are standing against the other wall of the sanctuary, just as in the contemporary French churches. Entering the church, we step into a whitewashed Puritan temple room. Though the interior structure is amazing with delightful fretwork and ornaments on the altar, the pulpit and the monumental chandeliers, which were made in 1611. The most beautiful and most interesting part of St. Peter's Church is the chapel hiding the northwest corner, whose walls are richly decorated with frescoes of the early Middle Ages. The black limestone altar with wood stanchions was made in 1599, as well as the side altar made of alabaster. The mural was made in the 16th century. The tower's north side chapel, named Chapel Kramer, works as a christening chapel today. The Malmo Central Station is also built of red bricks, but this 3 centuries younger than the church, and the Gothic style can be recognised only in a few details. In front of it, there is the bus station of the city. The distinctive clock tower of the building stands next to the canal, in the neighbourhood of the Borahus. Under the stone bridges of the canal, pleasure boats are riding the waves, showing that the town wants to please the tourists. The Bora House of Malmo was built for the stock exchange. Walking among the red brick houses, we can reach the port. Malmo Port renovated lighthouse symbolises the city's modern architecture, as well as the nearby residential area and special shaped towers, the turning torso. The attraction of the port is a true-to-scale replica of a Viking ship. A modern suspension bridge spans over the harbour and leads to the new residential area called Ystad, built in Scandinavian style. The turning torso has been dubbed the new high-rise, one of the architectural sites of the Öresund region, the tallest building in Sweden. The twisted-shaped skyscraper outbreaks the sky behind the apartment complex. The building, designed by Santiago Calatrava, was opened in 2005. The height of the 54-storey tower is 190 metres. The basic idea of the tower is 9 cuboids, each of ascending levels, and compared to the underlying, all are rotated so that the top unit to the bottom is already turning to 90 degrees. The implementation of this shape is enforced by a central core, and a static balance is provided by external steel elements. The mills, just like in most rural areas, also have several functions in Sweden. Besides water mills, the windmills are also widely spread and were used in the grain milling as well as energy production. Some nice mills can be seen in Skansen of Stockholm, but walking in the countryside we also can discover them along the way. Some mills have been rebuilt as pensions or restaurants. Mills along the highways also offer traditional dishes of the Swedish countryside, and we experience the traditional hospitality as well. Ystad is perhaps the most popular recreation centre of the Sweden Southland. Its popularity is due to perhaps that no other city has preserved this medieval facade on the Swedish landscape. The winding narrow streets are lined with timber houses. The town gained its current face in 4 or 5 centuries, but modern times seemingly do not leave traces. The settlement was first mentioned in 1244. In 1267 the Franciscans founded a monastery here. Ystad became a member of the Hanseatic League in the 14th century. A 1599 diploma entitled the settlement to export oxen, which was a profitable business. The city, under the Treaty of Roskilde, with other parts of the Skåne province, has been attached from Denmark to Sweden. At that time, it had 1,600 inhabitants. The railway was built in 1866, and 30 years later, the population increased to 10,000. According to tradition, one of the wooden houses in Stora Västergatan was occupied twice by King Charles XII. The red-bricked houses with carved beams praise the skills and sense of beauty of medieval carpenters. The windows are protected by shutters made of solid wood. The gas lamps have been replaced by the same style electric lamps. The sills, as well as the squares, are cheered up with flowers. The Virgin Mary Church was started to be built around 1200, but a clear style of Romanesque was lost in the Middle Ages. Its curiosity is that there is a lighthouse keeper working here still. Another ecclesiastic memory of Ystad is the Franciscan monastery and its church St. Peter's. The former monastery gives home to the city museum. A popular crime novel from Henning Mankell, which has been translated to many languages, takes place in Ystad, in which Commissioner Wallander unravels a terrible crime. Northwest of Ystad, at the beach, there is Helingborg. Helsingborg, with its 115,000 inhabitants, is the centre of the southern province of Skåne and the country's 4th largest city. Helsingborg is Sweden's nearest town to Denmark. The castle of Helsingør, known from Shakespeare's Hamlet, is clearly visible on the other side of Öresund. Between the two cities, ferries go every 20 minutes. The historical Helsingborg, with its old houses, is an old town full of attractions. In the centre of the town there is a fortress named Karnan, which was built by Valdemar the Fourth, with 36 metres high donjon towers, compelling stairs. At the foot of the fortress, old stone houses stand next to modern stores, wide boulevards and small lanes. Helsingborg was established as a Danish town. It was first mentioned in a charter in 1070. Tradition holds that the city was founded when Knut IV was born. In the 12th century, there was a fortress with a castle. The city's population is mainly settled near the coast. Helsingborg became one of Denmark's most important cities by the 14th century. In 1332, the Swedish King Magnus Eriksson ran off the town. In 1360, Danish King Valdemar Atterdag IV occupied it. Christopher III, King of Denmark, Sweden and Norway, was born here in the 15th century. During the Danish-Swedish War in the 18th century, the population fled the village many times as the city was threatened. During the Great Northern War, the hard-handed Danish Christian Ditlev Reventlow occupied the city, but the following year the Swedes took it back. In 1710, plague devastated the city and it became completely deserted. During World War II, the Danish Jews came across the sea to the city en masse. We wouldn't be in Sweden if we didn't see a Volvo or a Saab of at least 40 years, but in beautiful condition, parked around. Stadshuset, the red brick town hall with a tower, was built in 1897. The famous stained glass windows of the neo-Gothic palace were made by G. Cederström. The huge palace is very prominent among the surrounding houses due to its size and the colour. Its central tower is like the Venice Campanile, built in a fabulous castle. At the side of the town hall stands the equestrian statue of Magnus Stenbock. He defended Helsingborg from the Danes' attack in 1710. As a conqueror and commander, the national hero is surrounded by respect. His statue, covered with green tarnish, is the only equestrian statue in Sweden which is not a statue of a king. The statue, created by John Börjes, was unveiled in December 1901. Stenbock Magnus, an English-born military officer and earl, was born in 1665 and was the governor of Skåne from 1705. He died in 1717 and was buried in Upsala Cathedral. The port and the coast is almost totally swamped by tourism, and while waiting for our pleasure boat, we can eat our fill of the famous smörgåsbröd dishes, or Swedish meatballs and cranberry sauce. The site of the port, also visible from the distance, is a marine monument named the Sjöfartsmonument, a winged female figure who holds sailing ships in both her hands. The figure stands on a bronze column of about 20 meters height. We bear to the northwest along the coast. Gothenburg is Sweden's second largest city. The port is 11 kilometers long, and its custom houses, warehouses, logistics sites, shipbuilding and repair plants in the area occupy 1.5 million square feet. Skandiahamnen is the centre of the passenger port, where large ferries are docking, carrying buses, passenger cars and even whole trains. The fishing port, which was opened in 1910, is the largest in all of Scandinavia. Gothenburg, northern gateway of Europe, received city status in 1621 by King Gustav Adolf. The Maritime Museum, so-called Sjöfarts, is located in Gamla Varvsparken. Next to it stands the Seamen's Tower in memory of those who fell in World War I. On the streets, modern trams and nostalgia trams are also running. The latter are favourites of the tourists. In summer, pleasure boats show the port and its surroundings from the water. The construction of Göta Channel began on behalf of King Charles XII. It connects Stockholm and Gothenburg. Of the 560 kilometres of seaway, 87 kilometres is artificial channel. Tourists particularly love it because although the road takes 3 days, the most beautiful parts of the country can be seen during the ride. The vessels must cross over 65 sluices, and there are a number of road bridges over the canal. From the 3 pleasure boats, the eldest one is nearly 150 years old. The town of strategic importance in Danish and Norwegian pincers was built by the Dutch, fleeing from religious riots and persecution. Gothenburg, with strong defensive walls, towers and moat, lions crowned Rook and Rook, was the most protected fortress of northern Europe in the late 1600s. At the island of Göta River, we find the ruins of Bohus fortress from the 12th century. In the Middle Ages, it was the southernmost point of Norway. After losing its strategic importance, the Danes destroyed it, but one of the towers of the Far's Hat is still pretty good repair. Before the foundation of Gothenburg, Ystad was the country's only port opening into the North Sea, and due to its important strategic position, had been destroyed several times. A new town was built on its site. At the time of its foundation, downtown Stockholm looked around the same as it does today. Comparing the skyline and feel of the two cities, we feel the difference, which perhaps also can be explained by the fact that Gothenburg had been started to be built by Dutch architects. This is why we still feel a noticeable effect of the Netherlands, although there were English and Scottish among the first settlers. The former bishopric seat and a university town have become an industrial town with 500,000 inhabitants. It has a well-known technical university where experts are educated in the production industry of paper, ship and automotive manufacture. Gothenburg gives home, among others, to Volvo, SKF and Ericsson. Gothenburg Cathedral was built in 1665. The building, with 3 naves, was rebuilt by Karl Karlsberg in Empire style 2 centuries later. Visitors experience the usual bustle of a university town on the streets. The harbour along the canal reaches the Christina Church, which burned down in 1746. The famous German architect J.A. Roos rebuilt it. Originally it was built by Dutch settlers in 1624. The tower had been built in 1783 by C.F. Alderkrantz. The altar is made by Louis Desprez. The building is also called a German church. The 42 bells of the clock tower ring at 8 a.m, noon, 6 p.m. and 8 p.m. The Municipal Museum originally hosted the East Indian Company. It provides archaeological, ethnographic and cultural exhibitions. On the latter, there can be seen the only issued Viking ship of Sweden, which is not an imitation. Gustav Adolf II statue stands in the square named after him, and it depicts the scene when the king appoints the new city centre. Gustav Adolf, during his 21-year reign of Sweden, held up the country to be a European power. The square is surrounded by public buildings, the stock exchange and the town hall, designed by Nicodemus Tessin. Going along the Valand to the Avenue, we get to the Goethe-Platz Square. The fountain in the middle stands together with Carl Miel's sculpture of Poseidon. The square was built to the town's 300th founding anniversary, and it was inaugurated at the occasion of the 1923 World Expo. The 40-metre wide and nearly 1 kilometre long avenue is lined with cafes and restaurants and is a popular meeting point. Its speciality is the piping system under the road, which is heated in the wintertime. The square is the cultural centre of Gothenburg. Here we find houses, the Museum of Fine Arts, the Municipal Theatre and the City Library. Gothenburg for centuries had good relations with Britain, and the Anglo-American ideas and customs of the people were adopted here soon. The city was nicknamed Little London for a while, and residents have welcomed this flag. The chaise running here would also be welcome in Hyde Park. From the Lilla Bowman ship stage we may start to Alvsborg Fort. The island fortress is better preserved than the Bohus fortress. Among the beautifully renovated wall museums, restaurants and souvenir shops await the passengers. There are many more fort ruins to visit for interested passengers. Southern Sweden has fertile, rich and varied lands. In the foreground of the eastern shore there are 2 large islands located, Öland and Gotland. In the surroundings of Helsingborg, waves strike high on the cliffs and rock walls. Around here, the old fishermen's settlements are the main attractions. Further on to the north, we can see the fjords similar to those of Norway. The picturesque landscape of central and northern Sweden are situated on the plateau laced by lakes and rocks. The Malaren is the third largest lake in Europe. The number of lakes is estimated to be about 96,000, but canals have an important role too. As Sweden has very clean waters, many anglers fish in them. The professional fishermen and amateur fishermen go for perch here, but the salmon herringer is also caught. Mariefred is an idyllic small town. It can be reached by a pleasure boat, but the real attraction of the area in summertime is the Lilliput, running between Mariefred and Ystad and travelling among lakes, forests and meadows. Since Kurt Tucholsky wrote his novel, The Gripsholm Castle, streams of tourists visit the romantic building on Lake Marielin's island. The writer was buried in Mariefred according to his last will. The surrounding waters of the palace are inhabited by swans. The castle with picturesque natural surroundings was given the name after the royal family Grip, who built it in 1383. Later it was the property of Danish Queen Margaret, Sten Sturm and Gustav Vasa. Charles IX substantially rebuilt it. From this period comes the southern and western yard and the forecastle. Hedvig Eleonora, who got the castle for her wedding, expanded it with the Queen Vane, while Gustav III got a Knight Vane and a theatre built. He arranged his workroom in the Grip Tower and considered Gripsholm as a sort of summer residence. The Renaissance-style building reflects the effects of the German Palladian style of that time. The last major restoration was at the time of John Charlemagne XIV. His architect was Friedrich Liljeqvist. In the lobby, we see the portraits of Vasa kings. The assembly hall, bedroom of Gustav Vasa, Gustav III's White Salon, the theatre, the gallery of Westphalia, and Hedvig Eleonora's room are worth a visit. The reliefs on the walls remind us of the former residence. In the courtyard, the guns and the planters peacefully coexist with each other. The entrance part of the castle is lined with stone runes. In the beautiful cottage garden, greenhouses and the botanic garden, many curiosities are grown. Nynäshamn is a popular resort with its organised beaches, but also for the port where ships depart for Gotland Island in the Baltic Sea. The Swedish countryside, sleepy towns and remote islands were the subject of the country's two most famous writers. Astrid Lindgren novels all take place here. Ronja, the Robber's Daughter, is rooted in medieval tales, while Bill Bergson's series took place in an imaginary but very real small Swedish town, Lidköping. The Nobel Prize winner, Selma Lagerlöf, with her The Wonderful Adventures of Niels, gives perfect overview of the country's geography, flora and fauna. Her novel titled The Story of Gösta Berling reveals a jolly world full of holidays, colourful, romantic adventures, northern sagas spread by unwritten tradition, legends and tales, all of which are based on the reality of Värmland, where the writer spent her childhood and adolescence. In 1914, she became the first female member of the Swedish Academy. Talking about Swedish literature, we may pay tribute to August Strindberg, who began medical studies at Uppsala University. He was also a drama student, though he worked as a tutor, a telegrapher, a librarian and a journalist too. Finally, he became a major figure of Swedish literature because of his plays and dramas. His place was taken over by the recently deceased Ingmar Bergman, who is primarily known as a film director, though, besides his screenplays, his novels and dramas are significant. Scandinavian artists' main characteristic is that their home customs and traditions are very deeply rooted and define their entire lives and works. Perhaps the only exceptions are the famous Swedish pop singers. For example, ABBA came into vogue again after the success of the Mamma Mia movie. The Stockholm Archipelago has its own very personal style. The people here live in very close proximity to sometimes inclement nature. Although many of the inhabitants commute by scheduled ships to work in larger cities, some work on site. The operation of the lighthouse, water transportation or fishing activity is as important today as it was centuries ago. Many people work at disaster relief agencies or the Coast Guard. As Astrid Lindgren wrote in one of her novels, "A main street was in the deepest rest and peace, and dreamed in the summer sun. The chestnut trees were in bloom. Main Street and Little Street, that was all there were, and then the great square. For the rest there are only small cobblestones, steep alleyways and blind alleys, which head the river, or unexpectedly end at some dilapidated house, which is only there because of its age, and adamantly oppose any modern urban planning. Most of the gardens are quite messy, overgrown by old, gnarled apple and pear trees, and the threadbare grass is never mowed. Most of the houses are large wooden quickies, built by the architect of a past era who, intoxicated by the beauty, flourished them with the most unexpected salience, gables and towers. In fact, it is not a nice town, but some old-fashioned calmness emanates from it. Still, there is some fairness, at least in these hot summer days when roses, violets and peonies are blooming in the gardens, and lime trees in the little street make their leaves reflect calmly in the stream, which trickles so slowly in its furrow bed wondering. Here, perhaps, we wouldn't be surprised if we beheld Niels Holgersson on the back of the flying wild geese above the same red window-framed white houses. The capital of Sweden is Stockholm. It is built on 14 islands at the mouth of Lake Malaren by the Stockholm Archipelago. In Swedish, stock means log and holm means islet, so it is understandable why it is often called the Venice of the North. Both Gamla Stan and Riddersholm are clearly shown in the town hall, and its characteristic more than 100-meter high tower with 3 crowns on it. Stadshuset reflects both the impacts of Scandinavian Gothic and classical Tuscan architecture. The Nobel Prize ceremony is usually held here in the Blue Room of the City Hall, while the banquet is downtown in the Konserthuset. Marshal Jean-Baptiste Bernadotte, who became King of Sweden after Charles John XIV, came of a French bourgeois family. He successfully fought in the Napoleonic Wars. Seeking the favour of Napoleon, Sweden made him the heir of the old King Charles XIII, who was without a successor. Covered with a green patina, an equestrian statue of him decorates the capital. The heart of the city is Gamla Stan Island, together with the old town and the intersection called Slussen. The Katarina Elevator, a Katarina Hissen, whose silhouette became a townscape element, was opened to passengers in 1883. Across metal bridges and roof terraces we can reach Mosebach on Katarina Hill. From here, we can have a view of Slussen, an intersection which is a real virtuosity of engineering. In this charming part of town, Södra Theatre and the Katarina Church are located. It is enriched by romantic gates and stairs. Its terraced coffee bars are belvederes as well. From a distance, those 300-year-old houses give a nice backdrop to Startgarden Port. The district situated above the conjunction is called Södermalm. As Per Anders Fogelström writes about his hometown, there is no doubt that the most beautiful street in the city is Fjällgatan. The old-fashioned narrow cobblestone street runs on the top of the hill. Street lamps are placed on the wall of the houses. Then the street widens, giving a wonderful view to the city and the waters. At number 34, Fjällgatan, an old civilian house is presented with contemporary furnishing, a clock and period furniture. Gamla Stan, or the Old City, is an island full of historical memories and attractions. The royal palace is located here with old houses surrounding. In Gamla Stan, almost every house has its own history. Queen Christina and then the philosopher Descartes lived in von der Linde Palace. The Bengt Hansen House is a medieval merchant home which remains unchanged. The headquarters of the old National Bank, with its Baroque facade, was built in the mid-1600s. The name of the Baroque German church, or the Old Town, points out that the Hansa Alliance had almost unlimited influence over the ports of the Baltic Sea, even over Stockholm. This situation changed after Gustav Vasa ascended the throne, but a number of German merchants and craftsmen stayed and lived in Gamla Stan. In medieval Stockholm, St. Gertrude's Church hosted important meetings and political rallies. Then the German Jewish community took it over and built its tower designed by Hubert de Besche. Around 1640 it was rebuilt and expanded by Hans Jakob Christler. Furnishings also remained from this era, despite the fact that the church was devastated in a fire in 1886. After that, the tower was rebuilt by the German architect J.C. Rashdorf, while the Baroque Royal Gallery was designed by the plans of Nicodemus Tessin Sr. The Nobel Museum was inaugurated for the centenary of the death of the institutor Alfred Nobel. The exhibition is devoted to show information on the famous prize. Stortorget is one of the most beautiful squares in town. In medieval times it was a busy marketplace. The well on the square was designed by Erik Palmsted. Nowadays, tourists drink coffee on the charming veranda of the red buildings of Skadska Huset and the yellow Sjöfridska Huset. The cross-vaulted cellars of Grillska Huset are also popular among tourists. Following the course of the city's now demolished defensive wall, Västerlånggatan is maybe the most important walking street of the old town of Stockholm. Storkyrkan is the oldest church in Stockholm. It was built in Gothic style and is also known as St. Nikolai Kyrka, St. Nicholas Church, after the patron saint of sailors. According to the chronicles, Birger Jarl ordered it to be built in the 13th century. The five-nave Baroque building is the excellent work of J.E. Karlberg. It was the first Lutheran church and it also hosted royal ceremonies. In 1319, the first Swedish king was crowned here. Since then it has been the coronation church of Sweden. On its walls there is a painting which depicts a halo display of 1535. It is called Parhelion. The modern statue of Karl Miles commemorates the architect of the royal palace, Nicodemus Tessin. The royal family moved to the palace in 1754. The square-planned building surrounds the inner courtyard. Each of its wings represents particular style. The eastern wings surround the beautiful outer courtyard. On the opposite side, half-round wings embrace the inner courtyard, where the recently popular ceremony of the changing of the guard takes place. The royal palace no longer functions as the residence of the royal family, though Carl Gustaf XVI and Queen Sylvia's offices can be found here. Receptions, ceremonies and balls take place in these royal halls. The neighbouring building, the typical Riddarholmskyrkan, or the Church of Knights. It is the burial church of the Swedish monarchs. All but two great kings of the last 3 centuries are entombed here. There were so many of them that all could not be put in the crypt. That's why there are some graves next to the building as well. Horse-drawn carriages transport passengers between the Royal Palace and the Riddarholmskirkan. The neoclassical Concerthuset, or concert hall, is the home to the Royal Stockholm Philharmonic Orchestra. On its facade, the Orpheus group of Carl Miles can be seen. On December the 10th, on the anniversary of Nobel's death, the award ceremony banquet is held in the building. The square in front of the concert hall is Hötorget, a marketplace which still preserves the traditions of past times. Unusually clean, fresh air, dense, dark green pine forests, sparkling lakes among seemingly endless forests, bright blue sky, wide rivers, green grass in contrast with red painted houses with white doors and window frames. That's Sweden. Vast free landscapes where masses of flowers bloom in May and trees glitter in unrealistic colours in September. The Swedes like sailing, love playing golf and horse riding. Having been used mainly for transporting freight, horses today are kept as pets. On some farms, tourists can ride horses, or even take riding lessons as well. Due to the warm currents of the Atlantic Ocean, Sweden's climate is not as harsh as you might think, looking at the map, though the Swedish capital lies on the same latitude as Greenland, Alaska and Siberia. The summer is usually short but pleasantly warm, and the climate of the whole country can be considered moderate continental. About 40 kilometers from Stockholm, in the northwest, is Sigtuna, the former capital. Today no one would say it about this friendly little village. Sweden's oldest road was found under the town, established in the 11th century. The main street of the city today also follows this trail. From late 1100 for some 250 years, it was a thriving royal and commercial centre. Around 990, Sweden's first coins were minted here during the reign of Olof Skotkonung. Sigtuna's decline was caused by the fact that the power of the church moved to Upsala and a secular arm relocated its headquarters to Stockholm. From the 15th century, it was gradually losing ground behind Uppsala, Visby, Kalmar and then Stockholm, only to rise nowadays as a popular tourist destination. The town has important educational institutions. King Carl Gustaf XVI also learned here in his youth. The ruins of the four churches of St. Per, St. Olaf and St. Lars are remembrances of Sigtuna's short heroic era. The old churches were preaching the word until the Reformation. Today their ruins are popular attractions among tourists who like to visit here during the trip to Skokloster Castle. They were consecrated before the Norman era and meant not only for God's glory, but also for the protection of the residents. Their windows were only narrow loopholes, only one man fitted through the doors, and their buildings were surrounded by a high granite fence. They weren't rebuilt after the Vikings' destruction. The Skokloster Castle was built on one of the peninsulas of Lake Malaren, on the site of an old monastery. The estate was donated to Herman Wrangel by the king as a wedding present. His son, the future Chancellor, started the constructions in 1654. The castle is square-shaped with 4 corner towers and multi-storey wings around the courtyard. The forecourt has a lake view. The building provides for archives, a library and an armoury. In the tomb chapel of the red brick church lie Herman Wrangel and his wife, Margareta Grip. When their son died, the castle first passed into the hands of the Brahe, then to the Essen family. Magnus Brahe and his family were buried here as well. Apart from them, the crypt holds the sarcophagus of 2 rulers, George III and Eric XIV. The constructions to the Romanesque episcopal church began in the 12th century. A century later, it was converted into a 3-nave basilica. With the years, it was expanded with a transept and apse and some chapels, but its towers were built only in the 18th century. The lush green peaceful park is noisy with the sound of knights' tournament in summer. Medieval knights wearing armour and helmets, carrying shields and swords, attack each other from horseback or on foot. The attractions, of course, are assisted by actors in contemporary costumes. From one of the chariots, tourists can get a pint of foaming beer from the victualler. In a country with so much water, it is natural that everybody loves water sports: sailing, water skiing, jet ski, surfing and kiting. And diving, for which cold but clean water is very suitable. Many people willingly try warm waters too. For example, almost all the diving centres of southern Thailand are Swedish owned. As Karel Capek wrote in his diary, "Look how beautiful it is, the sea with white waves, the barren, jagged, muscular shore. Look at the shrieking gulls, how smoothly they float on the long waves of the breeze. You can look into the water stirred by the propellers as green as emerald, as malachite like ice, or who knows what else it can be compared to, but it is furiously white and lined with frothy froths. Look at the short way behind us, which is designated by the spume to the horizon." Jönköping was built at the centre of the land, in line with Gothenburg, at the southern end of Lake Vättern, Sweden's second largest lake. It is an industrial town with a population of 115,000, however, a true tourist paradise at the side of the lake. The 130-kilometre long lake is connected to the north and the Baltic Sea by the Göta Canal, where ferries create connection with the coastal towns. Upsala is the country's education and religious centre. It is located north of Stockholm at the country's east coast. At the end of June, white nights can be observed similarly to the phenomenon in St. Petersburg. Twilight may last all night. Uppsala originally lay about 5 miles north from its present location, in the place where today the old town Gamla Uppsala is located. In the 11th century, during Christian missionary work, the town resisted the Christian forces, but was eventually captured and the town's pagan temple was destroyed. Since the city was a centre of paganism, it became the centre of the Christian church as well. First, it was elevated to the episcopate, then in 1164 was made into an archdiocese. In 1702, a devastating fire burned down Uppsala, but still many old buildings have survived, particularly in the western part of the town where the cathedral, the university and the castle is. The lion crest of the city dates from 1737. It was redrawn repeatedly over time. It is official in its present form since 1986. Abandoned bicycles by the Furus River are a means of transport of students. They are not expensive, they don't pollute the environment, and within the town there aren't long distances anyway. Although Gamla Uppsala now belongs to Uppsala administratively, it is not joined with it altogether. In fact, it can be regarded as a separate urban area of about 5,000 inhabitants. It is a popular tourist attraction with museums, churches, an open-air museum and graves from the Viking Age. The city's big festival is the famous Valborg. Held on the 30th of April, Sweden's largest bonfire is lit next to the hills of Gamla Uppsala. The city's main attractions are, of course, in connection with the university, the cathedral and the castle. However, it is recommended to visit Civilian Town on the east bank of the Furus River. Its centre is Stortorget, or Main Square, which filled the role of the marketplace in the Middle Ages. A neo-Renaissance town hall can be found there, which was originally a 17th century civic house. The botanist Carl von Linné's house and garden was converted into a museum. Another famous professor at Uppsala University was Anders Celsius, whose name is preserved by the scales of thermometers used in Europe. The house of the famous astronomer was built in the 18th century. Today's Uppsala, the old Östra Aros, was in fact the port of the old Uppsala. By 1274, Östra Aros overtook that development of the old capital, and since the church of Gamla Uppsala was burnt down in that year, the Archbishop moved here where a new magnificent cathedral was built. The 13th century cathedral was the royal coronation church for a long time. The length of the Gothic basilica is the same as the height of its tower, 118 metres. Sweden's largest church was built in the classic model, with 3 naves, a transept, a chancel, a choir, several chapels and 2 towers. The North Tower hosts an exhibition of liturgical clothing, chalices, censers and mass linens. The altars, statues and frescoes are all works of local craftsmen. The church organ is the second largest in the country. The murals are the works of Caleb Althin. They evoke important moments of life of rulers and kings. The creator of Vasa crypt frescoes is J.G. Sundberg, while the statues were made by Willem Boy. The tombs of the Jagiellonian chapel are also his work. The church gives place to tombs of great figures in Sweden's history. Here lies Gustav Vasa, Jagiellonian Catherine and George II. Besides rulers, Chancellor Bengt Oxenstierna, the botanist Linne and some bishops are also buried here. So as Helsingborg's defender, Marshal Magnus Stenbock. With his enactment, Gustav Vasa delegated a huge fortune to the state, collected by the Catholic Church. This was, and perhaps still is, the basis of the economic strength of Sweden. With skillful management, the young ruler made the country revive, also broke with Christianity and established the Lutheran Church. Under his successors, the country became one of the great powers in Europe. Sweden's patron saint, St. Eric's relics are kept in the Ystad chapel. It is interesting that not only medieval royalties are buried in Upsala. The old town attractions include King Bjorn's Mound, or Kung Bjorn's Hug. This enormous kurgan is a memory from the pagan times. According to archaeologists, they are originated from the 5th or 6th century and were raised for the members of the Ynglinga royal dynasty. About 5 kilometers north from today's downtown, near the mounds, ruins of a pagan temple were found. Other mounds are assumed to be places of elections and legislation. Walpurgis Night is celebrated across the country, but most spectacularly in the university towns. Exactly at 3 o'clock, bells start to chime. It is a signal for all graduate students to put their white hats on at the same time. In the evening, bonfires are lit in the streets. Torchlight pageants are held for celebrating that the days are getting longer and the spring is coming. Founded in 1477, the oldest university in the whole of Scandinavia is located here. Established by Jacob Ulfsson, subsequent rulers have also done much for this higher education institution. The huge new main building of the university is from the 19th century. Its main facade is neo-Renaissance, but the builders willingly used other historical stylistics as well. Many buildings of the city are closely connected to the university. Naturally the hostels, but also some research institutes and several museums too. The university library holds more than 4 million volumes, and its manuscript collection is also significant. The oldest form in Swedish, the oldest manuscript of the Poetic Edda, and the Codex Argenteus are preserved here. The construction of the Uppsala Castle was ordered by Gustav Vasa and carried out by Pavel Schütz, who also designed the Gripsholm Castle. The 2 round towers at the ends give a typical shape of the stretched building. Sten Sture was killed in the castle in 1567, and Queen Christina gave up her throne here a century later. Her role was played by Greta Garbo in the famous movie. Gustav Adolf II's daughter took the throne after her father's death at the age of 6. She didn't want to get married, so she resigned her rank instead and moved to Rome. She is buried in the St. Peter's Basilica. The bronze bust of Gustav Vasa was placed on the former military parade ground, as were the historical cannons. The square in front of the palace has the site to the botanical garden. In front of its neoclassical main building, there is a statue of the great Swedish botanist Carl von Linné.